All right, we got a new five sheet today. This one from the Gateway Pundit over here. Let's start out with the headline as they write it. Revealed. Simple math shows Biden claims 13 million more votes than were eligible voters who voted in 2020 election. Alright, what is that title? I said it was an opinion. It's simple math. Uh, it was revealed. There's a little editorialization in there. It's not just stating plain facts. There's a little bit of arguability in there. How did I paraphrase it? It has been revealed that simple math shows 13 million more votes were cast for Biden than were possible with the eligible number of voters. Alright, what bias is this Gateway Pundit? It's definitely on the right. It's a rather far right outlet. Alright, let's find the thesis. I put that it was a fact. It's actually pretty deep in this article near the end. It's this one in the red. If President Trump won 74 million votes, then that leaves only 67.5 million votes remaining for Biden. That means 13 million duplicate or made up ballots were created and counted for Biden. It's almost like a conclusion the way they structured this article, but that is the thesis. They don't really state it until then. They're, building up to it before then. So I put that as a fact. I paraphrased it. Out of 213.8 registered voters, 66.2% voted, and Trump won 74 million. So only 67.5 million were left for Biden, and the other 13 million were fabricated. Alright, that's really the heart of this article, was about this simple math proving that there's no way Biden could have honestly won. What evidence do they have supporting that claim? So the core of it was the tweets from this guy, this Bill Binney. They have a couple tweets from him. That appears to be what started, what led to this article being written. They also have a source discussing how many registered voters there are. This one here. And then they have a Washington Post article discussing the turnout, which they have a little graphic included right there. So that's really all the evidence they have, those three sources putting it together. Alright, what's the structure of this article? Started out, just number one, I described this as poison the well. The very first, right, they have the title up here, and then the very first thing in the article, the 2020 election will go down as the most corrupt U.S. election in history. The U.S. election was corrupted in so many ways. So, I mean, that's like their opening sentence was just their opening was the conclusion. It's just telling you how to feel about this subject matter before they give you any evidence on which to base that feeling. So, certainly, we're going to talk about that in the manipulation tactics down here. But there's a reason I describe that as poison the well. So, that's the first thing they talk about. Then they talk about this Bill Binney and his tweets of U.S. intel fame. There are those tweets. They then talk about that data with the Washington Post, number of registered voters. That allows them to put together their little math equation here, come up with a thesis, and mean 13 million duplicate or made up ballots for Biden. So that's most all of the article. They then say Well, that just goes along with what we already know, because we've already been witnessing all this fraud. That's the second to last paragraph. And finally, they're saying, but even if we didn't witness the fraud, just looking at this math that we presented in this article, anyone should agree with us that there was just massive fraud going on. Like, we've really, this, what was there fraud in the 2020 election? That's been a contentious issue for some time. But based on the math presented in this article, I think we can put it to bed. Math and liberal or conservatives and liberals can agree there was clearly massive fraud, millions of votes stolen based on this simple math. That's the final paragraph there. All right, let's move on to the manipulation tactics. Starting out with that poison the well thing. The very first sentence they have is just telling you how to feel without giving you any rational reason to feel that way. Uh, and yeah, this is a pretty blatant usage of that tactic. Once you put an image in a reader's mind about, like this guilty person went on the stand and claimed he wasn't at the crime scene, well, how are you going to feel about what a guilty person claimed? Of course he's lying, he's guilty. Well, if they just said this person went on the stand and claimed he was innocent, well, maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. But when you poison the well like that, when you, before the reader has made a determination on the value of that source, they tell you what the value of that source is. That's poisoning the well. Let's see. Let's take a look at the correct definition here. When an author aims to discredit a source of information, usually preemptively, instead of assessing the credibility of the information. This can be done in a productive way. If someone claiming to have seen a fire has a history with many false fire claims, then that information is important. This tactic is often used in a more manipulative way, i.e., the defendant falsely denies murdering these people before explaining the defendant's argument about his alibi, the forensic inconsistencies, etc. So here the word falsely is not reporting a fact, it's stating an opinion, but the way it's framed implies that it's a fact. So if we jump back to our article here, the U.S. election will go down as the most corrupt U.S. election in history. It was corrupted in so many ways. The way that's stated feels a lot like a fact, but based on all the evidence that's come out so far, that's clearly in the opinion category. So before they start giving us all this evidence about this simple math, which may or may not convince us on that point, they've already colored that opinion. So that's poison the well. Straw man, feigning ignorance. So they didn't have anyone arguing the alternative here. It was just the one side of the argument presented. Let's quickly pull this up. So, anytime an author omits a material fact or a relevant argument from the conversation, that's what meets the definition here. So, in a contentious issue, there might be multiple arguments that one side is making, so it's usually best to try to steelman it. Pick their strongest argument, and that's the one you argue against. Unless you have an actual person there, then you argue against whatever argument they present to you. What's inappropriate is focusing on the weakest arguments you can imagine. Or what happened here is they didn't focus on any arguments. They acted as if this is some new revelatory thing. Yeah, it's revealed. And then when we get down to this final paragraph again, it's saying, this is math liberals very simple math that even liberals should be able to understand. So their point is, if the liberals are able to wrap their head around this, then they should agree with us. Not that the liberals might have a counter argument of some kind that we're ignoring here. The only thing it would take to convince the liberals, the way this is being framed, is the liberals being able to understand the math, when in reality they likely have a counter argument, which is just being ignored here. So that's a straw man. Alright, finally, other notes. What were they trying to do here? The big thing that really stood out to me that just instantly caught me is, red flag here. If the numbers were so far off in such an easily detectable way, right? We're talking about 13 million votes that were found through simple math. If that's really what was going on, that there was a discrepancy of 13 million votes that could be discovered through simple math, then you'd expect that's something that would be found earlier. You'd expect that's something that would have come up real quick. And the fact that it didn't come up, that, it was not raised earlier, that casts suspicion on the whole premise of this article. But the fact that this article is not discussing the fact that it didn't come up earlier casts even more doubt on the premise of this article, right? Because if they were being honest here, they would be saying, like, holy smokes, we got this simple math that changes everything. 13 million votes. And well, I know what you're thinking, guys. 13 million votes, simple math. How didn't we see this earlier? Well, it turns out we were looking over here, but we should have been looking over there, and blah, blah, blah. Maybe their explanation would have sucked, but they should have at least had an explanation. They should have at least addressed the fact that there was this huge discrepancy found by simple math, and that it took months for anyone on this side of the aisle to even bring this up. The fact that they don't even address that inconsistency in the article, that is another red flag. So overall, I would rate this with pretty low reliability, but there might have been something I missed here. So I will include the link to this article in the description. Pop on in there, fill out your own 5-sheet. If you think there's a way, I would be surprised if you found a way to make this claim credible. But if you got a way to do it, let me know. I will definitely take it out. I will definitely check it out. Otherwise, let's keep filling out those 5 sheets. Let's keep cutting through this fake news. Let's keep making headway, guys.